Olivia Mercer handed her husband divorce papers in the middle of the company's annual celebration dinner. The timing was deliberate. So was the audience. Nearly 300 employees filled the ballroom, enjoying the final moments of an event designed to celebrate another profitable year. Conversations stopped one by one as Olivia walked across the room and placed a thick envelope in front of Ryan Mercer. The music continued for a few seconds. Then even the band seemed to sense something was wrong. The room grew quieter, not completely silent, just quiet enough for everyone to notice. Ryan looked down at the envelope, then at his wife, then at the man standing behind her. Ethan Blackwell, Senior Operations Director, Olivia's boss. A man known throughout the company for his expensive suits, expensive cars, and expensive confidence. His presence answered questions Ryan had been asking himself for months, questions he had never wanted answered. Olivia stood perfectly still. There was no visible guilt, no sadness, no uncertainty. Only the expression of someone who had already moved on long before the other person realized the relationship was ending. Ryan slowly opened the envelope. Inside were divorce documents. Prepared, reviewed, ready for signatures. Several nearby employees lowered their eyes. Others continued watching. Human curiosity had always been stronger than politeness, especially when public humiliation was involved. Ryan turned another page. Everything was already complete. The property division, the financial disclosures, the legal language. All prepared without him. All decided without him. Across the ballroom, whispers began spreading from table to table. Olivia made it clear through her body language that she considered the marriage finished. Ethan stood behind her like a man who believed he had already won. For a moment, Ryan simply stared at the papers, not because he was shocked, because he was not. The signs had been there for nearly a year. The late nights, the business trips, the growing emotional distance, the conversations that became shorter every month, the increasing number of comparisons between his life and other people's success. What surprised him was not the divorce. It was the location, the public spectacle, the desire to make sure everyone witnessed it. Olivia eventually removed her wedding ring and placed it on top of the documents. The gesture seemed carefully rehearsed, like something she had imagined many times before finally doing it. Several employees exchanged uncomfortable glances. The message was clear. The marriage was over. Ryan remained calm, far calmer than anyone expected, especially Olivia, especially Ethan. The reaction they wanted never came. There was no argument, no pleading, no emotional collapse. Ryan simply closed the folder and placed it back on the table. That confused them, because neither of them knew something important. 3 weeks earlier, a phone call had changed everything. And Ryan had not told a single person, not even his wife, especially not his wife. At the time, Ryan was working his second job. Most people inside the ballroom knew him as Olivia's husband. Few understood how hard he worked. By day, he managed inventory for a small manufacturing supplier. At night, he repaired commercial equipment for local businesses. His schedule was exhausting. His clothes usually smelled like machine oil. His hands carried the scars of years spent fixing things other people broke. The money was not terrible, but it was not impressive either, especially compared to the executive lifestyle Olivia had become increasingly obsessed with. She wanted luxury. Ryan wanted stability. Those two goals had slowly become incompatible. The phone call arrived on a Thursday evening. Ryan was replacing a damaged motor inside an industrial refrigeration unit when an unfamiliar number appeared on his screen. Normally, he ignored unknown calls. This time he answered. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Rebecca Holloway, a corporate attorney. The conversation immediately felt strange. Ryan had never needed a corporate attorney. The attorney asked several verification questions. Then she informed him that a meeting needed to take place immediately regarding an ownership matter. Ownership. The word meant nothing to him. At least initially. The following morning he entered one of the tallest buildings in the city. Everything about the place felt expensive. The marble floors, the security staff, the artwork hanging on the walls. Ryan looked completely out of place. His work boots alone probably cost less than the lobby furniture. Rebecca greeted him personally. That surprised him. What surprised him even more was the folder waiting on the conference table. Inside were documents connected to a company called Meridian Dynamics, a company Ryan had never heard of. At least, that is what he thought. Then Rebecca explained what Meridian Dynamics actually owned. Transportation networks, logistics firms, manufacturing suppliers, technology companies, warehouses, distribution centers. The company was not famous because it rarely appeared in headlines. It operated behind the scenes, quietly, efficiently, profitably. And according to the documents in front of him, Ryan owned a significant portion of it. At first, he assumed there had been a mistake. There had to be. People like him did not suddenly become owners of massive corporations. Rebecca patiently explained the situation. Years earlier, Ryan's grandfather had established a private investment trust. The trust remained hidden from most family members. Certain conditions had to be met before ownership transferred. One of those conditions involved age. Another involved succession planning. Those conditions had finally been satisfied. The transfer was complete. Legally binding. Irreversible. Ryan spent nearly 2 hours reviewing documents. Even then, the information barely felt real. The numbers were absurd. The assets were enormous. The responsibilities were equally significant. But one detail mattered more than everything else. Meridian Dynamics owned a controlling interest in Crestline Enterprises, and Crestline Enterprises owned the company where Olivia worked, the company where Ethan Blackwell expected to become chief executive officer within the next 2 years. Ryan left the building that day carrying enough information to completely transform his life. Yet he told nobody, because something had already begun bothering him: Olivia's behavior, the timing, the secrecy, the emotional distance. A man did not survive years of difficult work without learning how to recognize warning signs. And there were too many warning signs. Over the following weeks, Ryan paid closer attention. Not obsessively. Not suspiciously. Carefully. Patterns emerged. Meetings that lasted longer than necessary. Weekend trips connected to projects that did not actually require travel. Messages hidden when he entered rooms. Phone calls taken outside. Small details. Harmless individually, concerning collectively. Then came the dinner. The one that removed all remaining doubt. Ryan had arrived early to surprise Olivia. Instead, he accidentally discovered her already having dinner with Ethan. The restaurant was not the problem. Executives often met employees. The body language was the problem. The familiarity. The comfort. The way they looked at each other when they believed nobody was watching. Ryan left before either of them noticed him. He never mentioned it. There was no need. The truth had revealed itself. Now, standing in the ballroom with divorce papers in front of him, Ryan understood exactly why Olivia seemed so confident. She believed she was leaving an ordinary man for an extraordinary future. She believed she was upgrading her life. She believed she had correctly identified the winner. And perhaps most importantly, she believed Ryan would always remain exactly where he was. What she did not know was that her understanding of reality was already outdated. By several weeks, the divorce proceeded quickly. Faster than most people expected. Ryan cooperated with everything. He signed documents, attended meetings, answered questions, never argued, never created problems. That confused Olivia. People expecting emotional battles often become uncomfortable when none arrive. Meanwhile, Ethan grew increasingly visible in Olivia's life. Company events, public appearances, weekend photos, business travel. Eventually, nobody bothered pretending anymore. The relationship became public. Most people assumed Ryan was devastated. In reality, something else occupied his attention. The deeper he examined Meridian Dynamics, the more he realized how much work awaited him. The company was successful, but success often hides problems. And Ryan had always been good at finding problems, especially operational ones. He began reviewing reports, meeting executives, studying divisions, learning how the organization actually functioned. One name appeared repeatedly: Ethan Blackwell. Promotion recommendations, executive evaluations, succession discussions, leadership projections. Ethan was not just successful, he was being positioned for something bigger, much bigger. At first glance, everything looked impressive. Exceptional performance, strong growth, excellent leadership reviews, the kind of record that attracts board approval. But Ryan noticed something strange. Small inconsistencies. Tiny details buried inside larger reports. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to raise questions. And Ryan had learned something important during years spent repairing machinery. Small problems often hide larger ones. Sometimes a strange noise is not just a strange noise. Sometimes it is the first sign of a catastrophic failure. A week later, Ryan ordered a confidential review, then another, then a third. What investigators eventually discovered would change everything. Not only for Ethan, not only for Olivia, but for hundreds of employees whose careers had quietly suffered because of decisions made behind closed doors. The first report arrived on a Monday morning. Ryan opened it, read 3 pages, then immediately requested every supporting document, because what he found was not a mistake. It was not an accident, and it certainly was not a misunderstanding. It was something much worse, and Ethan Blackwell had no idea anyone was looking. The first report arrived on a Monday morning. Ryan expected minor compliance issues, perhaps accounting irregularities, maybe a few exaggerated performance numbers. What he found was far worse. The investigation team had spent 6 weeks quietly reviewing internal records across multiple divisions. Most executives never noticed. That was intentional. The review operated under the authority of the ownership group. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Even fewer understood its true purpose. Ryan sat alone inside a conference room overlooking the city skyline as he read the findings. The first section focused on employee turnover. At first glance, the numbers looked normal. Then the investigators compared departments. Patterns appeared. Departments managed by Ethan consistently reported exceptional productivity, exceptional profits, exceptional efficiency, the kind of numbers that attracted bonuses and promotions. But there was another statistic hidden beneath those achievements: employee departures, stress-related leave, workplace complaints, burnout rates. Those numbers were equally exceptional, just not in a good way. The deeper Ryan read, the worse it became. Former employees described a culture built on pressure and fear. Targets increased without warning. Schedules changed without notice. Workers who questioned decisions found themselves transferred, isolated, or quietly pushed out. The behavior was not illegal, not yet, but it painted a picture. And the picture was not flattering. The second report arrived 3 days later. This one focused on contracts. Several vendor agreements carried unusual approval histories. Payments moved through approved channels. Signatures appeared legitimate. Everything looked normal. Until investigators followed the money. That is where the problems began. Certain contracts consistently benefited companies connected to people inside Ethan's professional network, friends, former business partners, individuals who appeared repeatedly across multiple transactions. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention, large enough to generate significant profits, small enough to hide, large enough to matter. Ryan requested a complete forensic review. The board approved it immediately. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely unaware. His attention was focused elsewhere, specifically on Olivia. The relationship that once seemed exciting had started changing. Reality had begun replacing fantasy. The transition was not smooth. During the affair, Ethan had represented possibility, success, status, luxury. Now he represented everyday reality, and reality was less impressive. Long hours, frequent travel, constant pressure, endless meetings, the same flaws that exist inside every human being. Olivia slowly realized something uncomfortable. The perfect life she imagined did not actually exist. But by then, the marriage was over. And pride has a way of trapping people inside their own decisions. So she ignored the doubts. At least initially. 3 weeks later, another development emerged. A woman named Maria Jensen requested a private meeting with investigators. Her employment record showed 15 years with the company. Excellent performance, no disciplinary history, no obvious reason to attract attention, yet she arrived carrying a folder nearly 3 inches thick. Inside were emails, reports, meeting notes, performance reviews, years of documentation, years of silence, years of evidence. Maria explained that she had attempted to raise concerns repeatedly. Each attempt produced the same result: nothing. Management protected management. Executives protected executives. Complaints disappeared. Careers stalled. People learned to stay quiet. Until now. For the first time, someone powerful appeared willing to listen. Maria was not the last. Others followed. Then more. Then even more. Within a month, investigators interviewed dozens of current and former employees. Every story added another piece to the puzzle. Every piece pointed toward the same conclusion. The culture Ethan proudly presented to senior leadership was not real. It was manufactured, built on carefully selected metrics, carefully managed perceptions, carefully hidden consequences. The third report arrived 2 months after the investigation began. Ryan read it twice, then a third time. Not because he doubted it, because he wanted to be absolutely certain. The findings confirmed systematic manipulation of performance data. Certain failures had been reclassified. Certain losses had been reassigned. Certain successes had been exaggerated. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms individually. Together, they formed a pattern, a deliberate pattern, a profitable pattern, a dangerous pattern. Ryan scheduled a board meeting. Not an ordinary meeting, a special session. Mandatory attendance. Executive leadership only. The invitation offered almost no details. That made people nervous, especially Ethan. For the first time, he sensed something shifting. Something he could not identify. Something moving beneath the surface. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning. 3 days before it occurred, Olivia received unexpected news. Her department would also attend. The request confused her. Operational reviews rarely involved her team. Still, she accepted the invitation. Nobody wanted to decline a board-level request, especially when career advancement remained a possibility. The morning finally arrived. Executives filled the conference center. Department heads arrived carrying laptops and presentation materials. Most expected routine business discussions. Forecasts, budgets, expansion plans, normal corporate matters. Instead, they walked into something entirely different. A massive presentation screen dominated the room. Additional legal representatives sat near the back. Several board members attended in person. The atmosphere felt unusually formal, unusually tense. Conversations became quieter. Questions remained unanswered. Then the doors opened. Ryan entered. The room froze. Not everyone recognized him immediately. Many did, especially Olivia, especially Ethan. Neither expected to see him there. Certainly not walking alongside board members. Certainly not receiving greetings from senior executives. Certainly not sitting at the head of the table. Confusion spread rapidly. People exchanged glances. Whispers started. Nobody understood what was happening. Olivia stared at Ryan. Something felt wrong. Not wrong in a small way. Wrong in a life-changing way. For the first time since the divorce, uncertainty appeared in her expression. The meeting began. The chairman welcomed everyone. Then he introduced the organization's majority ownership representative. The words seemed ordinary, until he said Ryan's name. The silence that followed felt physical, heavy, unavoidable. The kind of silence that changes a room forever. Several executives visibly straightened in their chairs. Others looked toward Ethan, then toward Olivia, then back toward Ryan. Understanding arrived slowly. Then, all at once, Ryan was not there as a guest. He was not there as an observer. He was not there as an employee. He was there as one of the people who owned the company. Olivia's face lost color. Ethan stopped moving entirely. The reality settled over the room like a storm cloud. Everything they thought they understood had just changed, and the meeting had only begun. Ryan opened the first report. Then the second. Then the third. A massive screen behind him displayed findings one by one. Charts. Timelines. Financial records. Internal communications. Evidence. Nothing emotional. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. And facts are often more dangerous than accusations. Because facts do not care how people feel about them. The room remained silent as years of hidden problems appeared on the screen, department by department. Decision by decision. Choice by choice. Every finding supported by documentation. Every claim supported by evidence. Every conclusion impossible to ignore. Ethan attempted to remain calm, but the confidence that once defined him had started disappearing, because he recognized many of those documents. He knew where this presentation was heading, and he knew he had no good way to stop it. Across the room, Olivia felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Fear. Not fear of losing status. Not fear of embarrassment. Something deeper. The fear that comes when someone realizes they misunderstood everything. The fear that comes when reality suddenly looks very different than the story they told themselves. And the worst part? The most damaging evidence still had not appeared. Ryan had not even reached the final report. The report that would expose something no one in the room was prepared to see. The final report was only 63 pages long. Compared to the thousands of documents investigators had reviewed, it seemed almost insignificant. It was not. In many ways, it was the most damaging report of all, because it answered a question nobody had been asking. Not publicly, at least. Why had so many talented employees disappeared? The company's records showed resignations, career changes, voluntary departures, normal business turnover. The report showed something else. Patterns. Repeated patterns. Employees who challenged questionable decisions suddenly received negative evaluations. Employees who questioned budget reductions found promotions delayed. Employees who reported concerns often discovered their careers moving backward instead of forward. None of it looked suspicious individually. Together, it formed a system. A system designed to protect certain people. A system designed to silence others. And at the center of that system stood Ethan Blackwell. The room remained silent as the findings appeared on screen. Not because people were shocked, because many of them already knew. They simply never believed anyone powerful would care. Now someone did. Ryan continued moving through the evidence, patiently, methodically, without emotion. That made it worse. Anger can be dismissed. Facts cannot. By the time the final slide appeared, nobody in the room was looking at Ryan anymore. They were looking at Ethan, the man who had spent years building an image of flawless leadership, the man who had always seemed one step ahead, the man who now looked completely unprepared. Several board members exchanged quiet remarks. Legal representatives took notes. Human resources executives reviewed documents they had hoped never to see again. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer a business meeting. It was an accountability meeting. And accountability has a way of making powerful people uncomfortable. The chairman finally spoke. The recommendation was immediate. A full executive review. Termination proceedings. Referral to outside investigators. Additional audits across every division Ethan had managed. The decision was unanimous. Not close. Not controversial. Unanimous. Years of carefully constructed reputation collapsed in less than 20 minutes. No dramatic confrontation followed. No shouting. No threats. No emotional speeches. Only consequences. Real consequences. The kind that arrive after years of avoiding them. Ethan sat motionless. For the first time in a very long time, he looked like a man who understood he could not control the outcome. Security was not called. There was no need. The meeting ended. Board members left. Executives gathered their belongings. Conversation started quietly, then grew louder. Everyone knew they had witnessed something significant, not because an executive had fallen. Executives fall all the time. Because the truth had finally caught up to someone who spent years outrunning it. Across the room, Olivia remained seated. She barely noticed people leaving. Her attention never left Ryan. The realization had been building for months. Now it was impossible to ignore. The man she had dismissed, the man she had embarrassed, the man she believed would never become anything more than an exhausted worker trying to survive. That man had walked into the room as one of the most powerful people in the company. Not because of luck. Not because of revenge. Because life had continued moving forward while she was looking in the wrong direction. And that realization hurt more than she expected. The weeks that followed changed everything. News of the investigation spread quickly. Former employees began coming forward. Additional reviews uncovered even more issues. Several senior managers lost their positions. Departments were reorganized. Policies changed. Reporting systems improved. For the first time in years, employees felt comfortable speaking honestly. Maria Jensen watched the transformation with cautious optimism. She had spent years believing nobody would ever listen. Now she watched executives discussing concerns that once disappeared without explanation. The change was not immediate, but it was real. And sometimes real change matters more than dramatic victories. Meanwhile, Ethan's situation continued deteriorating. Industry contacts stopped returning calls. Recruiters became difficult to reach. Business opportunities disappeared. People who once praised his leadership suddenly remembered his flaws. His professional reputation had been built over years. Its collapse took only months. The relationship with Olivia did not survive much longer, not because of one specific argument, not because of one specific event, because the foundation underneath it was gone. The excitement, the ambition, the fantasy, all of it had depended on a version of reality that no longer existed. Eventually, they became two people sharing disappointment, and disappointment rarely builds healthy relationships. 6 months later, Olivia moved into a smaller apartment. The luxury lifestyle she once chased had faded. Not disappeared entirely, just revealed itself for what it had always been. Temporary. She spent a long time trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The answer arrived slowly. Painfully. One memory at a time. She remembered Ryan working late nights. Not because he enjoyed it. Because he wanted security. She remembered weekends spent repairing equipment, not because he lacked ambition, because he was willing to sacrifice comfort for stability. She remembered countless small acts of loyalty she had ignored because they were not exciting. And she remembered the moment she handed him divorce papers in front of hundreds of people. At the time, she believed she was leaving someone behind. Now she realized she had never really understood who he was. Several months later, she saw him again. Not at a corporate event, not at a board meeting, not at a company function. At a small community center. The encounter happened completely by accident. Ryan was helping organize a scholarship program for local trade students. Young people entering technical careers, future mechanics, electricians, engineers, workers. The kinds of people most executives never noticed. He was not standing on a stage. He was not giving interviews. He was not seeking attention. He was simply helping, the same way he always had. Olivia watched from a distance. For nearly 10 minutes, nobody treated Ryan like an owner. Nobody treated him like a powerful businessman. They treated him like Ryan, the man they respected, the man they trusted, the man who showed up when he said he would. For the first time, Olivia understood something important. Money had changed Ryan's circumstances. It had not changed Ryan. The kindness was still there. The work ethic was still there. The humility was still there. The qualities she once overlooked were the same qualities everyone else seemed to value. And suddenly the loss felt much larger than she expected. Because it was not about wealth. It was not about ownership. It was not about opportunity. It was about character. And character had been standing beside her the entire time. She simply failed to recognize it. Ryan eventually noticed her. Their eyes met briefly. There was no anger in his expression. No bitterness. No satisfaction. Only peace. The kind of peace people find after surviving something difficult. He nodded politely, then returned to helping students. The interaction lasted less than 3 seconds, yet somehow it said everything. Life had moved forward, for both of them, just not in the same direction. A year later, the company looked very different. Employee satisfaction improved, turnover declined, transparency increased. Departments once dominated by fear now operated differently, not perfectly. No company is perfect, but better, much better. Maria received a promotion. Several former employees returned. New leadership emerged, and the culture slowly became something worth protecting. Ryan rarely appeared in public company discussions. He preferred working behind the scenes, reviewing projects, supporting initiatives, investing in people. The spotlight never interested him. Results did. As for Olivia, she eventually rebuilt her life. The process was not easy. Growth rarely is. But she learned something valuable. Success is not always loud. Character is not always glamorous. And the people who seem ordinary often carry extraordinary value beneath the surface. Unfortunately, some lessons arrive after important choices have already been made. The divorce papers had ended a marriage. But they also revealed something neither person fully understood at the time. One person was chasing appearances. The other was building substance. Appearances can disappear surprisingly fast. Substance tends to last. And in the end, that made all the difference. The company survived. The truth surfaced. The employees were heard. The consequences arrived. And Ryan Mercer never needed revenge. Because sometimes the most powerful victory is not watching someone lose. It is continuing to grow long after they stop believing in you. And by the time everyone finally understood who Ryan really was, he no longer needed them to, 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 needed